North's reservations about the use of force and his reservations about the war were not conducive to making him a good wartime leader. It has to be said that Lord North was no William Pitt, nor even a Robert Walpole. North had a divided cabinet, a divided government, and he was not good at simply forcing heads together and creating unity of purpose within his government. It meant that they were deeply divided on key issues. One good example is the issue of what terms to offer in the peace of 1776. North helped to appoint Admiral Lord Richard Howe as the admiral in America to serve with his brother Sir William Howe. And these brothers were both peace commissioners and military leaders. It created a confusion of purpose, and the brothers rather favoured North's policy of offering as liberal terms as possible. But even worse, in the middle of 1778, when North was almost paralysed by indecision, the government had to make a decision to send the British Navy out to America before a larger French Navy could arrive. Instead, they prevaricated, with the result that the French Navy got to the Americas early, and Admiral d'Estaing took the island of Dominica. Later in the war, the government was debating whether to stay in America or quit America and simply focus on the Caribbean. They never made those choices, those priorities, with the result that their forces were overextended. However, the deficiencies of his leadership were not due solely to his shortcomings. He faced some real problems. One is that in that period, the cabinets that led governments were not expected necessarily to be united. There was no concept of what is known today as cabinet responsibility. The Prime Minister didn't even appoint all of the members of the cabinet, which meant that he had people in his cabinet who were actually opposed to him. North carried excessive responsibilities. He had to oversee the entire patronage system. One of the stories I particularly like, which I came across in the diaries of the Baroness Riedesel, who was wife of the German commander in America. And when she came to Britain, she applied personally to Lord North to have a remission of the taxes on her carriage to cross the English Channel. In other words, he was dealing with a lot of trivia. He was at the same time not only dealing with the role of a modern Prime Minister, but he was also Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was responsible for the budget. So he essentially combined two modern jobs. He was also facing overwhelming issues at home and abroad, not only with the Revolutionary War, but within Ireland, where after 1778 a volunteer movement was founded, supposedly to defend Ireland against French attack. But what looked likely to be an Irish rebellion. And so the issue of Ireland dominated the government more than America in 1779. There were the worst riots of the 18th century in London in the summer of 1718, known as the Gordon riots, which did more damage than the French Revolutionary riots in 1789 did in Paris. He also faced a much more vigorous press than any of his predecessors. Newspapers had become more popular and more widespread. They were now allowed, just before the period of the American War, to report the proceedings in the House of Commons. He was, in other words, under greater scrutiny. even more problematic for him was that he faced some of the most brilliant parliamentary speakers in opposition of any period in the history of the House of Commons. People like Edmund Burke, Charles James Fox, William Pitt, both the elder and the younger. These were exceptionally able speakers. They made a great case against fighting the war. They focused a great deal on the mismanagement of the war by the government. They wanted to avoid seeming unpatriotic, and so they would largely focus on the way that the government was conducting the war.